And Trump says he is going to run Venezuela after capturing the country's president, Nicolas Maduro, who he called a dictator. The U.S. capture of Maduro and strikes on Caracas has triggered a massive upheaval in the geopolitical order. Additionally, it has also raised many questions. With allies and foes of Washington and Caracas expressing disquiet, China and Russia has condemned. So has France. EU too has expressed concerns. And the biggest question that hangs is what will happen next as Venezuela remains in chaos. The U.S. has framed the operation as part of a modern interpretation of the Monroe Doctrine, reviving a centuries-old policy. The policy, first declared in 1823, that warned foreign powers to stay out of the America. Well, nearly 2 centuries, the doctrine has served as the foundation of U.S. influence in Latin America, sometimes as diplomacy, often as intervention. And now, under Trump, that doctrine has been revived and is being framed as a security mandate rather than a historical warning. U.S. officials argue that the operation against Maduro was not an act of war, but they termed it as a law enforcement mission aimed at dismantling alleged narco state tied to drug cartels. By labeling the action a cartel takedown, the administration bypassed Congress and asserted its right to act unilaterally in the region.
Trump has on many occasions said that it's important to have control over Venezuelan oil, as this is they have the largest reserves and it's in America's backyard. But on the wider theme, I think this corresponds well with the new U.S. national security strategy, which recognizes that the U.S. need to control the Western Hemisphere in a new imperialist version of the Monroe Doctrine.
Now, Venezuela's close allies have strongly condemned the move. Moscow remains of the biggest oil buyer from the biggest oil buyer from Venezuela. Russia has urged Washington to release Venezuelan President Maduro and his wife. Beijing has responded strongly, calling it a violation of international law. In a statement, it says that it is deeply shocked and strongly condemns the U.S.'s blatant use of force against sovereign state and its action against its president. Experts say that the U.S. action has significant ramifications beyond Caracas, and there are apprehensions that what could be the next target of President Trump. In the past, Trump has said that he wants to take over Greenland. The U.S. president has also offered to make Canada its 51st state. The former Indian Minister of State for External Affairs, M.J. Akbar, now has said that this move by the United States could trigger a very serious kind of instability.
This is clearly a political action rather than, under the guise of a law and order case. And to that extent, I think it is evident that even America's strongest allies are showing and displaying concern, because once you start breaking the rule of law in search of political compliance, then you have triggered off a dynamic which can create instability of a very, very serious kind.
Now, even Europe, which has long questioned Maduro's legitimacy, has raised serious concerns about the legality and implications of the U.S. operation. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has said that any political transition in Venezuela must be peaceful, democratic, and in full compliance with the international law. France has sharply condemned the U.S. raid. French Foreign Minister calls it a blatant violation of the principle of non-use of force. European leaders caution that unilateral action by permanent members of the UN Security Council could have grave consequences for global security. And now Trump says that he is going to not just run the country for now, but also rebuild the oil infrastructure of Venezuela.
Going to have our very large United States oil companies, the biggest anywhere in the world, go in, spend billions of dollars, fix the badly broken infrastructure, the oil infrastructure, and start making money for the country.
Venezuela holds the largest proven oil reserves in the world, and this makes it one of the most strategically important energy producers on the planet. While the United States is the world's largest oil producer, most American crude is light and sweet. It's ideal for gasoline production, but limited when it comes to other refined products. Venezuelan oil is very different. It is heavy, it's thick, and more difficult to refine, which makes it cheaper, but also extremely valuable. Well, many U.S. refineries were originally built specifically to process this kind of heavy crude. They operate far more efficiently when using Venezuelan oil than when relying on domestic supplies. Now, because Venezuela is close to the United States, its oil is easier and cheaper to transport. Its heavy crude is also well suited to American refineries, many of which were built to process this type of oil. Gaining access to Venezuelan crude could give Washington a major economic boost and a clear strategic advantage. Now, following President Trump's re-election, the United States ramped up economic pressure on Venezuela. And this has been achieved in various ways, like imposing sanctions, targeting its oil exports. U.S. forces have actively seized Venezuelan oil tankers and launched targeted strikes on vessels tied to what it calls drug trafficking operations.